I don't want no oil, a spoiling my shoreline. I like fish much better than crud. I like birds and things, a-creeping and crawling. Won't trade no more oil for blood. The sun done give us all we need to make this country run. But that black demon oil's got us fussing and fighting, and I do believe it's time we was done. I don't want them nukes run by them kooks who think radioactivity is fun. No more three-headed frogs or kids with leukemia. Nuclear power ain't fit for a dog. The sun done give us all we need to make this country run. But that nuclear power's got us fussing and fighting, and I do believe it's time we was done. No nukes!
Good morning, Toledo, and good afternoon, Bowling Green. Good evening, Columbus, and hello to everyone on the internet, wherever and whenever you may be. My name is Joe DeMare, and I am here with my multi-layered co-host,
Rebecca Wood.
Yes, together, Rebecca and I are going to create an hour of wonderful radio called For a Green Future.
Actually, I should lose a layer because it's warm in here now that I think about it.
Well, that's the beauty of having so many layers.
Exactly.
Yeah. I mean, it's nice and cool outside right now, so, it's nice to start out with a bunch of layers. But, yeah, it's kind of interesting. Right now in Toledo, it's this beautiful foggy thing, which when I drove up from Bowling Green, there it's just sunny and, clear. And it's really kind of like sort of the Brigadoon effect when I got to Toledo this morning.
It's not Brigadoon up here.
No, I guess not.
It's a lot of things, but it ain't that.
Yeah. But what it is For a Green Future, which is a show about ecology and the environment. And we talk about those things and the ways that they affect you, your wealth, your health, your happiness, the wealth and health and happiness of your friends and family, and pretty much everybody and everything, because, like it or not, all of us are here on this tiny little planet called Earth. And we have a show that meets our usual high-quality standards today. We're going to chat for just the next 10 minutes or so. Then we have a interview with Don Hancock, not John Hancock, but Don Hancock. He's from New Mexico, where there's just a big piece of good news down there that Holtec, the evil corporation Holtec, has abandoned plans to try to get an interim nuclear waste storage site going. They just officially, finally, broke the contracts and are like, okay, we're not doing it, which is great news. And Don is part of a huge coalition of people that have been fighting this literally for decades. And so now they've won. So nice interview with him.
We need an evil, maniacal laugh soundtrack button that we can push whenever you mention Holtec. Yeah,
Right,
that, yeah.
I can do a good maniacal laugh, but I only like to use it for good. So
There we go, yeah.
I don't want to be the voice of Holtec.
Oh, no. No one wants that.
Yeah. So after let's hear from Don, then we're going to hear from our advertisers and patrons, to whom we are eternally grateful. And then, Rebecca, it will be your turn at the mic. And what do you have to talk about this week?
I have the Exumas swimming pigs.
Swimming pigs. Okay. So we've all heard about when pigs fly, but
yeah,
when they swim, that's something else.
There are not any flying pigs in the Bahamas yet that I know of.
Okay. Then it's ecological news from around the world, and we have a nice mix of good and bad news this week. And hopefully at some point during this hour, we will hear from you at 877-909-1007. That's 877-909-1007. And now we have the additional way of communicating. You can text us at 419-973-5841 at any point during the show. and we'll read your comment on the air, assuming it meets our standards of quality for comments. And that's 419-973-5841. So yesterday I had a really fun time. In my role as co-chair of the Wood County Green Party, we had a float in the Oak Harbor Parade. They're having their apple festival down there, and we got invited to come. Somebody said we'd like you to come and bring your giant earth ball. We have this 6-foot diameter, actually a 7-foot diameter. Now that I think about it, 7-foot diameter earth ball that's really cool. It's actually the earth on it is actually made from satellite photos from NASA of the Earth during times when there was no clouds, and so it's literally a photographic representation of the globe that's 7 feet in diameter.
Except it's painted, right?
No, it's printed.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
Interesting.
It was computer
I've seen
printed,
the thing.
and so it's a completely accurate Earth. It's really nice, and whenever we take it out, people are always like, "Oh, I'm originally from this little village in Malaysia, and we could find it on the globe." It's like, oh, there it is, right there. So it was tons of fun. You're rolling this giant earth ball, and I love the reaction of the children when they see it.
Yeah,
they're like, "Ooh, look, a giant ball!"
And unlike the red ball of the famous Red Ball project, it has never rolled all the way down Monroe Street and tried to float away on the Maumee River, for example. That thing was cursed, I tell you.
Well, it did try to get away a couple times.
Yeah.
I mean, whenever you have something that big, and if a wind comes up, it does try to take off on its own. But there were two of us controlling it.
Good.
It didn't actually get away. It was kind of funny because it happened right in front of the judges' stand. It kind of took off, and we had to chase it. Yeah, it was fun. And it was a beautiful day. It's right now it's still above average temperatures, but we're only 6 degrees above average, so not too awfully hot. It was very comfortable, and it just reminded me, doing stuff like that's just fun. We were there as part of the Wood County Green Party, so we had our little posters that said, save the earth and so forth. But the green future, I just want to, because our show, For a Green Future, sometimes we lose track of this idea that the green future is just as fun, actually more fun than our current present. I mean, our car was an electric car, so we had our electric van and our giant earth ball, and having a car that doesn't have any exhaust actually makes the parade better, because we were behind this bus thing, this mini bus, and it was kind of nasty to have to breathe in their fumes. And so if all the vehicles had been electric vehicles, it would have been just that much more pleasant, that much more fun.
And Canada will not be on fire every summer during the green future. So people with COVID damaged lungs like Becca will be able to breathe while they're walking the dog all year.
Yeah. That's the thing, is that we get to keep all our fun stuff if we switch to a sustainable society. There's this idea that, people who want us to stay on fossil fuels put out this idea that, you're going to have to give up your cars, you're going to have to give up, all this stuff. You're going to be like eating turnip greens and freezing in the dark. And nothing could be further from the truth, although turnip greens are not that bad,
They say that like it's a bad thing.
Yeah. If they're prepared right.
Yeah.
But that's my point, is that we'll still have parades. We could still have concerts. We could still do all the fun things that people in a society do. And it was just great. And so it was kind of interesting, though. So what we need to do is stop listening to those loud voices, the ones that are saying, if we switch to a sustainable society, you're going to be freezing in the dark and you can only eat meat once a year, and, all this fake stuff, because the loudest voices in our society right now are wrong. the loudest voices, the ones who have the biggest hold on the media, the ones that you hear the most often if you try to listen to the news or anything, they're telling us stuff that just isn't true right now.
I had mixed nuts for breakfast, just like a handful, but it set me up for really everything so far. I did like a 45-minute walk with the dog, felt fine,
Yeah.
So I don't know, maybe the problem is it's a lot of work. When you don't have very many teeth like me, it's a lot of work eating nuts. Takes a long time.
But, it's just as healthy, or it's healthier, and it keeps you going just as much as having had, a pound of breakfast sausage. And
Yeah, and
for
I live in fear of blood sugar dives, and I'm not having one so far. So
right, yeah. So, but unfortunately in our society, the loudest voices have the most resources. Like Oak Harbor, of course, lives in the shadow of Davis Bessie. And Davis Bessie had a float that came along in the parade not far behind ours. And our entry was nice with our giant earth ball that, people loved it because we could like roll it over at the crowd and they'd be like, then they'd push it back. It was
Yay.
lots of fun. But the Davis Bessie float was on a huge trailer. They had a 12-foot tall cooling tower that was belching smoke out. And
Because you needed more smoke after with all the diesel smoke at that point.
I mean, to be fair, it was probably just water with glycol in it. I mean, that's
Right.
usually what these parade float quote unquote smokers are made out of. But it was just they had this huge elaborate float with like 20 people on it, and it was just obviously that thousands and thousands of dollars had been spent on it, and but what it's doing, what it's celebrating, is a plant that's creating nuclear waste that's going to be hurting people for hundreds of thousands of years. And so they need that extra, they need all that extra hype, all that loudness. They need to have the megaphone, because if they don't, and people are just looking at it just purely from the point of view of consumers,
Right.
like, that price, that power is like 10 times more expensive than wind and solar. Or from the point of view of, sustainability, they're making these nuclear wastes that we still have no idea what to do with, and it's going to cost us billions and billions of dollars, hundreds of years into the future to take care of. They would lose. So I guess what I'm saying is that pay more attention to us and less attention to them.
Yes,
Because-
do that.
Yeah, because even though we don't have as much money and we don't get to have as loud a megaphone, we're right and they're wrong.
Exactly.
All right, but it was great. I loved it. I had a wonderful time, and if you ever get a chance to be in a parade, be in one, because it's just tons of fun. Oh, and my dog Ursula, she had the role of like the Green Party queen. She was sitting in the
Yeah.
passenger side of the van,
Yeah.
the EV van, and with the window rolled down, and she was just had her head out the window, and she was just regarding the crowds as they like poured adulation upon her. They were applauding and like, oh, look at the cute doggy, and she was just like, yes, I am that cute doggy. It was fun. The whole thing was a great time.
Oh, our little Koga, our previous dog, he would get so excited if you even touched his costume cupboard,
Uh-huh.
because he knew the costumes meant attention from
right.
people.
Okay, well, something else that we, of course, have been paying attention to is this idea that the nuclear industry wants to create an interim storage waste site, because they've got all this nuclear waste piling up at the reactors, and it costs money to take care of it, make sure it doesn't burn up and explode. And so they want to dump it as soon as possible. The problem, of course, is there is no dump. We started this whole industry with no way to handle the waste it creates. And so they've been wanting for decades to create an interim storage, which means taking it someplace to just wait for us to finally create a dump, just so it's no longer on their hands and they don't have to pay for it anymore, and let the taxpayers pay for it. But they just had a huge setback. This is actually a big wrench in the whole nuclear industry, because the company Holtec has given up their attempt to create an interim waste storage place in New Mexico. So we interviewed Don Hancock, who is one of the people who've been fighting against this interim storage place for decades. And let's hear that interview now.
Well, hello and welcome to For a Green Future. Could you please tell us your name and who you're with?
Yes, thank you for the invitation. I'm Don Hancock. I work with Southwest Research and Information Center, which is a 54-year-old private nonprofit organization based in Albuquerque, New Mexico.
Okay. Could you just tell us a little more about your organization?
So we work on a variety of energy, environmental, natural resources, and health issues. We consider ourselves to a great extent a technical assistance organization. So a lot of what we do is based on what communities, particularly um, what we might call low-income communities, are concerned about. And we try to provide a variety of information to help them understand what's going on and be able to take effective action. So in this particular case, New Mexico, of course, has a very long history of things nuclear. The first 80 years ago was the first nuclear weapons use in the world, the Trinity tests here in New Mexico. For many years, and starting in the 50s, we were the leading uranium producing state in the country. So we still have a lot of negative impacts from that, just like we have negative impacts from the test site. More recently, we are the home of the world's only deep geologic repository for nuclear waste called the Waste Isolation Pilot Plant, which is for plutonium contaminated waste from nuclear weapons. So the state has a pretty long history. Two of the three major national nuclear weapons laboratories, Los Alamos and Sandia, are in New Mexico. So, we have a lot of that. Interestingly, in the context of the commercial nuclear waste, we've never had an operating nuclear power plant in New Mexico. So while we have uranium and we have military related waste, we don't have commercial waste generated from nuclear power plants. So that's why the idea of putting all or most of the nation's commercial spent fuel from nuclear power plants is not an idea that's been popular in New Mexico for many decades, actually.
Right. And so the reason I'm inviting you on today is specifically in regards to that, the quote unquote interim nuclear waste storage site that they wanted to put in New Mexico. Holtec just announced that they're giving up, that they've been trying to get that isolation plant there for years and years, but they just said they're not going to go through with it. Could you give us a little more detail on what they said and your reaction?
Sure, like lots of things, there's a long history, and I won't go into all of it, but um, more than 20 years ago, the George W. Bush administration with Vice President Cheney had an idea of promoting nuclear power and what was called by them the Global Nuclear Energy Partnership. So, as a result of that, two cities, Carlsbad and Hobbs, and the two counties they're in, Eddy and Lee, thought, hey, this is a economic development opportunity. Federal government's going to pump billions of dollars into some kind of facility. So they bought over 1,000 acres of private land, basically unused, semi-arid, semi-desert land, and said, "Oh, we'll put this up for this nuclear thing that the Bush administration was going to do." Of course, that whole project collapsed and didn't go anyplace. So they had some people who wanted to promote something nuclear related in that area. And so then for a while, they were looking around for people who might be interested in them. And Holtec came along. Holtec is at the time, it's expanding its nuclear operations, was basically a nuclear waste container, nuclear waste storage, mostly container company, and so they formed an agreement. This Eddie Lee Energy Alliance and Holtec formed an agreement to both do revenue sharing if there was an economic venture that came out, and gave Holtec an option to purchase from these government entities this site. So that was almost 10 years ago. Holtec has done various things to try to move the project along, including seeking and getting a license from the Nuclear Regulatory Commission. But they never had support of people around the state. Anytime there were public hearings related to the NRC license or other forums, it was clear that while there were a few people in southeastern New Mexico that thought it was a good idea, the majority of people in the state did not. And that wasn't a new thing. As I mentioned, the idea of bringing commercial spent fuel, irradiated fuel to New Mexico is an idea that the people in the legislature rejected more than 45 years ago. Then again, in the early 90s, a different set of, and this time it was utility companies, tried to site a similar storage facility on the Mescalero Apache Reservation in New Mexico, and that was opposed and didn't go. So why Holtec didn't learn from any of that history and instead, wanted to come in. So anyway, what happened now this week was Holtec has been saying for a while that they were not going to proceed with the New Mexico site. It just wasn't viable. There was too much public opposition. The Eddie Lee Energy Alliance, this quasi-government entity that I mentioned earlier, resisted them pulling out of the agreement for a while, but then this week, the Eddie Lee Alliance let them pull out of both of the agreements that we talked about, and so Holtec is gone, and the local government entities still have this 1,000-acre plus piece of land that doesn't have anything on it, but Holtec is gone, and hopefully, I mean, there are other people who might have an idea of doing some kind of nuclear storage facility in New Mexico, but hopefully, after the various losing experiences people have had, somebody else won't come back. Holtec won't come back.
Right. And I think part of the basic problem is the whole concept of an interim nuclear waste site is kind of ridiculous, isn't it?
Correct. And that was something that people always could understand. And, Holtec, you say this is temporary. Well, where is the permanent site? Well, there isn't one, or maybe it'll be in Yucca Mountain, Nevada. Well, anybody who's paid attention knows that the Yucca Mountain, Nevada site went down almost 2 decades ago.
Mhm.
So that's not an option. The federal government isn't even seriously pursuing another permanent disposal option. So yeah, people of any stripe were able to easily two things that people in New Mexico were easily able to understand is one, it couldn't be temporary because there wasn't a permanent, and two, since more than 90% of the spent fuel, the existing spent fuel, is in the eastern half of the country, it must not be a very good deal, or the smart people in the east that have it would want to keep it rather than sending it to people in New Mexico. So, Holtec likes to say, oh, well, this would all be perfectly safe. Well, if it's perfectly safe, it must be okay to leave it where it is then.
Yeah, good point. And I think one reason that people in places like Ohio care about this is the act of shipping it would irradiate pretty much everybody all along the route. And so that whole idea that you're going to ship it twice, once to an interim and then again to the permanent, once again, bad idea.
Correct. Yes. And again, those a lot of times people say, well, I'm not a nuclear physicist or a health physicist or a nuclear engineer, so a lot of this stuff is hard to understand. What we've been talking about is not hard for people to understand. It's just, common sense. Is something temporary when there is nothing permanent? Is something safe where it is? And if so, why does it need to go someplace else? And if it's not safe where it is, how could it be safe to transport or bring it to where we are?
Yeah, and why are you still making it? Um, so
Well,
this,
that's another problem. Yes.
yeah. So this follows a kind of a bad news thing. The Supreme Court actually stepped in on this just a few months ago, didn't they? And it looked like things were going to go Holtec's way for a bit.
Well, I never thought that. Yeah, you are correct about the Supreme Court decision, but we in New Mexico, because of our experience, not with commercial nuclear power plants, but with uranium, and dealing with NRC licensing, don't really have much confidence in the Nuclear Regulatory Commission. We did thing in addition to telling Holtec and other people that this wasn't going to work. People of New Mexico and the governor and the legislature of New Mexico passed a law in 2023 that said you have to get state permits to operate such a facility. That's just not going to happen. That to get the permits, you first have to get the state's consent to have such a facility and then go through the permitting process. Well, obviously the state was not consenting to Holtec, and as I mentioned, earlier efforts the state didn't consent to and wasn't going to consent to. So we passed a law in 2023. The legislature passed a law in 2023 with a lot of popular support, setting up this permitting regime and requirement. So it was, I mean, Holtec participated in that process, and their lobbyists, spread money around and argued against the law, but they lost. So they've known since 2023, regardless of what the Supreme Court said about their license, that they weren't going to be able to go forward, and they're pretty clear about that. They talked about that during the legislative session in 2023, and what they've been saying formally in the last few months is specifically this is not a viable operation because of the overwhelming public and state official opposition.
You mentioned Waste Isolation Pilot Project, WIP, there. Uh, the history of trying to store the nuclear waste is not a particularly good one, is it? I mean, I see that your organization is part of a consortium opposing the expansion of WIP. Could you just give us a little taste of like some of the things that have gone wrong with what they've tried to do already?
As I mentioned, one idea in the 70s when WIP first got started is in addition to military waste, it might store military high-level waste or even commercial spent fuel. So, that was discussed in the 70s, and even people who supported WIP said no to high-level waste spent fuel. And so the pro-WIP legislature in the late 70s passed a law that said WIP is okay as long as it doesn't have high-level waste or commercial spent fuel, so prohibiting disposal. So this is a very long idea. The idea of WIP is a pilot plant. Again, just common sense language. Pilot would mean the first of several, and presumably fairly small in comparison to others. Well, once again, while there were promises and thoughts that there were going to be other repositories and the WIP was going to operate for 25 years and be filled up, and in the meantime, there would be other repositories built for this kind of waste. None of that's happened. And so people are saying, wait a minute, that's not okay. One of the very first things I heard when I went down to the WIP site in the 1970s was it was going to start clean and stay clean. In other words, waste was going to be packaged where it was going to be shipped safely, it was going to be disposed in the underground, 2,150 feet below ground. There would never be any release, never any contamination. Well, that was pretty quickly shown not to be true. Even in the early days, there were, minor problems with it. But then on Valentine's Day of 2014, there was a radiation release from the underground. The good news was because 9 days earlier there had been a fire that had hurt workers and forced the facility to be temporarily closed down. There wasn't anybody underground when this radiation release happened. Unfortunately, the federal government thought there wasn't any release from the underground, that again, the facility had operated greatly and had contained all the waste. That turned out to not be true. And all of the people on the surface at the time that it happened, and some that came the next day, all had internal radiation contamination, even though they were on the surface. This more than 2,000 feet away from where it was in the underground. In other words, there was enough explosive force to bring some of the waste out. So as a result of that, the facility was totally shut down for 3 years to try to deal with the contamination. There remains significant contamination in the underground, such that part of the area that was supposed to be used for waste disposal can't be used because it's too contaminated to put this start clean, stay clean waste in it, and for workers to be in the area. So, but the Department of Energy being the Department of Energy, rather than saying, oh, well, the pilot phase is over to this, we learned some things, and, we've got some waste in the underground, but, we've learned that there are some problems, rather than saying, oh, okay, let's start moving along with another repository. They said, oh, no, we're going to make WIP better, and so it will be able to continue to operate. And so when we talk about expansion, we're talking about expanding WIP in terms of its lifetime, not 25 years or 35 years, but decades and decades. That's why we say forever. That there is no plan, again, for another repository, so that sounds like forever too. And there are continuing plans to create more waste from more nuclear bombs. So, that such waste was never contemplated and wasn't supposed to go to WIP. So that again leads us and other people to say there are problems with the facility that are clearly known, and the longer the facility at this point is pretty much obsolete. It was built in the 1980s. So equipment and hoists and things like that, the basic facilities are getting old and creaky, and bad things happen on the surface when that happens. And in the underground, as the salt moves around, as it's supposed to, that creates more unsafe conditions for workers. So, we think that that it's time for the state to take more serious action in terms of limiting what can go to WIP and being clearer that they fully expect the federal government to fulfill the promises to seriously look for another repository, at least for the kind of plutonium contaminated or transuranic waste that comes to WIP. Obviously, a facility that could handle high-level waste could presumably handle this kind of waste as well. But at this point, the government's not doing anything about either of those. So, there are problems.
Well, that's just about all we have time for. Is there anything you'd like to add?
No, thank you very much for your interest. I appreciate people paying attention. Obviously, we in the West and in New Mexico pay attention, but I appreciate the fact that folks in Ohio and other parts of the country are paying attention as well. So thank you for that. Thank you for that.
All right. That was our interview. And what did you think? It's kind of a rare good news sort of interview in terms of the nuclear industry and the anti-nuclear movement. Give us a call at 877-909-1007, or you can text 419-973-5841. Okay, and the reason we're able to bring you great interviews from people who are in the midst of these environmental battles is because of our patrons and sponsors. Imagine a place where nature meets adventure, where you can climb, paddle, fish, and explore. That place, it's right here in Wood County. The Wood County Park District is here to protect, preserve, and inspire. We conserve natural and cultural treasures so you can enjoy the outdoors like never before by maintaining green spaces, providing fun programs, restoring wildlife habitats, and leading outdoor adventures. Want to connect with nature? Try your hand at archery, bouldering, geocaching, paddling, rappelling, and more. Whether you're seeking experience or a peaceful retreat, our parks are open every day from 8 a.m. to 30 minutes past sunset, all year round. Come explore, get outside, experience nature. Your parks, your adventures, waiting for you. Find us online at wcparks.org or follow on Instagram, Facebook, or X, or you can call 419-353-1897. That's 419-353-1897. The Wood County Park District, preserving nature, creating adventure, inspiring a greener future. And, of course, our show is also brought to you by our patrons. And our patrons are wonderful people who've gone to patreon.com, that's Patreon, and there they searched for a Green Future, popped our Patreon page, they signed up to have a little bit come out of their accounts every month, and that's how we can afford to keep this show on the air. And, I'm going to make a pitch for more patronage because we are at a point. We've had this show going for a while now, over 5 years, and we've always had it where it would be nice if we had more patrons, but unfortunately now we're at a point where we have to say we need more patrons. All right, so if you're somebody who's been kind of considering and saying, one of these days I'm going to get around to getting on the Patreon page for a Green Future.
This is a sign.
Yes, this is the time.
From the universe.
We really we need more patrons now. So, and one of the reasons we need patrons and our support is because we need to get Rebecca on the air every week with some vital information. What are we talking about this week, Rebecca?
All right. Well, today's segment is called Eczema K, When Pigs Swim.
Okay.
Right. So, one of the things that goes on in the Bahamas, which is a popular tourist attraction now, is a colony of feral pigs living on Big Major Cay in the Eczema Cays. The Bahamas itself is a string of island chains, a chain of islands, and the Eczema Cays are a string of even smaller islands, and one of them is Big Major Cay. So, right, it's accessible by boat tours. To the Pig Beach, that this place where they hang out is called the Pig Beach. If you want to pay more, you can also fly in, I believe. But yeah, I don't know if they encourage that. And it costs more money, definitely. There are several theories about how these pigs got here. Some of them are fairly colorful, like they were left, they swum ashore from a shipwreck, or possibly some sailors or pirates or something left them there to be eaten, but never came back to eat them. But what the ones that the locals favor is that people from a nearby cay had the pigs, but they were stinky. If you've ever lived downwind of a pig farm, you will understand why they decided to put them on another island nearby, a small boat ride away, so they could go feed them every day. And best of all, the prevailing winds are away from their island. So people, sea turtles out in the Pacific can deal with the stink as far as they're concerned. The Atlantic, I guess that would be. Yeah, it's the Gulf of Mexico, which is off the Atlantic. Yep. There we go. Right. So, yeah. One of the controversial things about this is that some people feel like they are encouraging sharks. Apparently, like in 2017, I think, there was a woman who was attacked by 3 tiger sharks at the same time, which is unusual behavior for tiger sharks swimming together. And some people have a theory that this is associated with the pigs swimming out towards the boats. Although there's really no evidence for this. Mm-hmm. Just some tiger sharks acted in a way that tiger sharks don't usually. So they're looking for reasons for that. So yeah, apparently what happened was the people from this island were coming over in a boat every day to feed these pigs, and some of the pigs being notoriously food motivated, started swimming out to be the first ones to get the food. So
Huh.
that's how it all began. So they also people noticed were approaching random boats to beg for scraps, and yeah, it's they kind of spread with the tourism. At this point, they think they're making anywhere between tens of millions to hundreds of millions per year. It's hard to say because people come for the Bahamas for other reasons. So
Mhm.
it's hard to say, if it's exactly the pigs that was just a side quest. And they by tradition they mostly feed them fruit and bread. I guess you don't feed them meat because that yada yada sharks.
Oh, right.
That would be bad. And there are warnings not to chase them, pick them up, or try to ride them, which is good advice because if you've been around livestock, you will realize that pigs mostly don't bite humans very much, but they might,
Yeah.
especially if you get on their nerves badly enough. Um, it's also adjacent to Bitter Cay, which has iguanas you can look at, and the Thunderball Grotto Cave, which is part of where the movie Thunderball with James Bond was
Oh, right.
yeah, was filmed. And you have to swim into the cave, and you have to do a little swimming between the boat if you actually want to get onto the to Pig Beach or the Iguana Cay, I think. So, but yeah, you can also, if you want to go along, you can just kind of stay on the boat and toss them a. Also, you got to toss things on the ground or in the water. You cannot hand feed the pigs because they might make a mistake and get overexcited at some point, and someone loses a hand. That would be
Bite
bad.
the hand that feeds them.
Yeah, there are also docile nurse sharks that you can pet at Compass Cay. You can swim with them or pet them. And one major problem with the situation is that pigs, in 2017, I believe, there was a situation where 7 pigs died. They think from eating sand because people tossed stuff on the sand and then they adjusted sand with the food, or they think some people were giving them alcohol. So it's not completely. Oh, sorry. The tiger shark attack was actually in 2019. I had that wrong. Um, so yeah, Big Major Cay is apparently 100 miles south of Nassau, which is sometimes that's where that's the hub of tourism, and people come and like take tours of the outer islands like the Exumas. You can actually go from Florida to see this too, and not even
Wow.
monkey around in the Bahamas if you want.
Or you could go to your local pig farm.
Yeah, there you go. But yeah, they're not on a beach. It's more fun on a beach.
Well, I guess
right.
everything's more fun on a beach, even pigs, I guess.
Yeah, there are other etiquette items like you should show empty hands if you don't have food. The pigs understand that.
Huh.
And you can also, while you're looking into the water to see the pigs, you can also see sea turtles, pufferfish, rays, and reef sharks sometimes. And there are no humans living on the island. It's been uninhabited for always, as far as we know. Maybe prehistorically it was or something. But so some cats and goats live there. And you can have tours that are like 15 minutes to half hour. The longer ones are more expensive. They have vets that visit the pigs. And people who take care of them, give them water, and they make them a nursery for piglets to protect them from the wind and rain. And you're supposed to let them come to you also. Don't run after the pigs. And okay, you may ask, okay, this is an animal that's not from the Bahamas. What is the impact here? Well, it's not great. It's been a few hundred years that they've been there, so arguably they are naturalized. They've replaced whatever was occupying their niche, But the pigs root around, which is not good. They uproot stuff. They displace other species, and and it's not great for the pigs in some ways. Although it might be more fun than a factory farm. I don't know. So, and the tourist presence too, leads to degradation of the beach and erosion and stuff. So there's that.
Yeah, I have to say, as an ecologist, that whole story gives me profoundly mixed feelings. But,
Yeah.
well, all right. Well, thank you, Rebecca.
You're welcome.
All right, and on to ecological news. And today's first story was supposed to be last week's last story. The Buckeye Environmental Network has reported back on October 4th on Facebook that the Marietta City Council has approved a resolution calling for a moratorium on injection wells. In other words, fracking and waste disposal by pumping it underground. They're telling the ODNR, so this isn't actually a law, this is the city council telling the State Department of Natural Resources that we need a 3-year moratorium on new fracking and injection well permits. And this was a big deal down there in Marietta. Over 100 people came to the meeting.
Wow.
There's a new organization that got formed because of this whole controversy called the Washington County for Safe Drinking Water. And they've started a lawsuit because what's happened down there is all those injection wells and all that fracking have destroyed people's wells and the aquifers by poisoning them.
Oh, dear.
And so they're starting to fight back. You know, it would have been nice, if we had started out realizing how terrible it was. Well, some of us realized how terrible it was going to be back at the beginning of the fracking industry, but the corporations made their usual promises that, it won't hurt drinking water. And of course, anybody with any sense could see that it was going to, and now that it has, at least people are fighting back now. But that was something that basically we got that from the Obama administration. They're the ones that made fracking a national pastime. Okay, next story. Not nearly so nice. This is Wayne National Forest. Story in The Guardian, U.S. on October 5th. And apparently the Trump administration wants to take Ohio's only national forest and clear cut 80% of it.
80%?
80%, yes.
Good Lord.
The forest is 1,300 square miles. They want to clear cut 1,000 square miles, which,
all
which
right.
would destroy the forest. It's critically endangered habitat for the species hellbenders. Every year, over 250,000 people come to hike and camp in the Wayne National Forest. It's kind of one of Ohio's best kept secrets that we've got this really cool wilderness right in the middle of the state. It's second growth because this area had been completely denuded about 100 years ago for coal mining.
Mm.
And in fact, everywhere in the forest, they have what are called gob piles.
Oh, my.
Which is toxic stuff left over from the coal mining. But what's happened in the 100 years is that the trees and the soil have grown up over it, and so it's all like sequestered. It's not leaking into the streams and the rivers.
Excellent.
But if you clear cut the forest, it will once again begin pouring into the streams and rivers, which go down into the Ohio River, which is the drinking water for tens of millions of people.
And thence to the Mississippi, one assumes.
Yeah, and off to the Mississippi eventually. And so what's happened is that they have declared an emergency, okay? And so that means no environmental regulations, no EPA protection. And they're claiming it's an emergency because they need to protect the area from wildfires. But as we've talked about before on the show, when you clear cut and you leave all these piles of slash laying around, and you get the thin little trees instead of the nice big thick forest canopy, that actually leads to more wildfires. So we're going to protect from wildfires by creating more wildfires.
Alrighty.
Yeah, that's kind of the logic that we see from the Trump administration. And of course, the places that they have done this, like in North Carolina, South Carolina, not only do you get more forest fires, but you also get landslides because most of this national forest is on hillsides, and so once again we'd be seeing headlines about communities getting wiped out by landslides. So this is terrible, and the Ohio Environmental Council is fighting it, and so I think we all need to chime in on this one because this is kind of the wild heart of Ohio, really. This 1,300
square miles
wilderness, and to clear cut 1,000
square miles
is just beyond the pale.
I know that people from outside of Ohio think all we have here is corn and cows, but no, we have trees also.
We do have some trees
We do.
at the moment.
Yes.
Right now we've got trees. Who knows what'll happen?
Maybe not in the future.
Yeah. So let's hope this gets stopped. Next story, we go off to Concord. And here's a good news story from the Concord Monitor. This is in Massachusetts. Um, September 29th, 2025. Coal power is gone. Merrimack Station in Bow has shut for good. And this was literally the last coal plant in the entire New England region. It was started up in 1960. It was a 460 megawatt plant, which is about half the size of your typical nuke plant. September 12th was its last day of operation. It had run for 65 years. And now for the last 2 years, it's only been what they call a peaking plant. That is, it only comes online when the prices are really high because there's more demand than electricity. But now it's shut down. There's still 2 little 17 megawatt kerosene-powered peaking plants on the site. But the company that wants to switch to solar and batteries. And so they're going to use, this is a 350-acre site. So that's a lot of solar.
Yeah.
And a lot of, if they just add a little wind in there too,
Yeah.
then they really got something. But the transition is happening despite what the federal government is trying to do, and despite what all the trolls and the PR firms that are trying to push nukes and fossil on us to keep us there. Over and over again, we see the transition is actually happening.
Yep.
It just needs to happen much, much faster if we want to survive. All right, next story, another good news story. The Australian Capital Territory, which is called the ACT. This is a story from Renew Economy. Title is, ACT went first and fastest to 100% renewables. It now looks like the smartest policy of all. And basically, the ACT, Australian Capital Territory, decided back in 2020 that they would get 100% of their power from just wind and sun. No nukes, no gas, no coal. And so what has happened...
So this is probably around Sydney, then?
Yeah.
Okay.
Exactly, around the capital of Australia.
It's sort of the equivalent of D.C.
Yeah. It's
Only maybe bigger, I don't know.
No, it's a small area, and this is why you don't hear about it a lot, because it's only about 500,000 people. And so, the pro-nukers are like, oh, that doesn't even count. It's so tiny. But one great thing about this experiment is that they now have the cheapest power in Australia. They only pay 3 cents per kilowatt hour. And they're making tons of money off the whole thing because they signed 20-year contracts with the wind and solar producers. And those contracts said that if the wholesale price goes above the agreed upon price, the wind and solar producers would give the excess back to the ACT. And they make $4.4 million a year now because prices have gone up because the price of generating fossil fuels has shot through the roof because of the Ukraine war. And so they're only paying 3 cents per kilowatt hour. The average in Australia is 11 cents, so almost quadruple.
Doesn't Australia have uranium mining?
Yes, Australia is one of the largest uranium exporters.
Yeah, I knew this because of the work of Peter Garrett and Midnight Oil, who is the lead singer of Midnight Oil and at one point ran for president of Australia. He has
Right.
they have a song called Blue Sky Mine.
But they don't have any nuclear power themselves. Australia
Right.
has never had a nuke plant.
Interesting.
Yeah, it is very interesting. But, it's just, another example that once you actually do it, once you commit to it and actually go 100% renewables, all kinds of unforeseen benefits start piling up. So
That and Put Down That Weapon, I think, is another song they made about, nuclear war, actually,
yeah,
and their role in providing the uranium.
or nuclear weapons. Yeah. All right. Well, final story. This back here in Ohio again. HB 170 has passed the Ohio House of Representatives with only 4 no votes. And what HB 170 is, the technical title is Establish Process to Regulate Carbon Capture and Storage Technology. And what this would do, if it gets through the Senate, is it would have Ohio EPA controlling carbon capture in Ohio. Now, carbon capture itself is a scam. Okay, we've covered this many times.
Right.
the idea that you're going to catch the carbon from your coal plant and pump it into the ground is ridiculous, because wherever they've tried it, it's failed. They've been working on the technology for 40 years and haven't been able to make it work. It's just a huge waste of money and a waste of time, because in every case, just generating the power with wind or solar is more economical and more practical than burning the coal and then trying to catch the coal and then the CO2 and then trying to pump it into the ground. But the reason this is really not good is because it takes the control of the carbon capture and storage away from the federal EPA and gives it to the Ohio EPA.
Oh, boy.
And the Ohio EPA is notorious for being sucky at protecting the environment.
How do you really feel, Joe?
Yeah. I mean, they typically will take, they'll give out fines of a couple $1,000s here and there. If you go to their website, they've got this list of companies they find. And in almost every case, somebody else told the Ohio EPA, hey, look, this company over here is doing something terrible. And so then they go into negotiations with the polluter. It takes about a year, and it comes out with a $3,400 fine or a $2,000 fine for trying to violate hazardous waste regulations, and really serious stuff. And they always get these tiny little fines, and they aren't really as proactive as they need to be. They're reactive. If someone complains to them, then they'll send somebody out to look it over, but they hardly ever catch anybody on their own. So it's this would be bad. All right, well, I think that's about it for this week. Thanks so much for listening. This is Joe DeMare.
And Rebecca Wood.
We are signing off.
I don't want no oil, a spoil in my shoreline. I like fish much better than crud. I like birds and things a-creeping and crawling. Won't trade no more oil for blood. The sun done give us all we need to make this country run. But that black demon oil's got us fussing and fighting, and I do believe it's time we was done. I don't want them nukes run by them kooks who think radioactivity is fun. No more three-headed frogs or kids with leukemia. Nuclear power ain't fit for a dog. The sun done give us all we need to make this country run. But that nuclear power's got us fussing and fighting,